Barabbas, a name spoken with the same lightness as turning the page of a book. Brief, swift, almost a whisper, yet in that whisper, layers of history, pain, and mystery coexist. At the culminating moment of the Passion, when the world seemed to be divided into the innocent and the guilty, a single gesture, the choice of a multitude, reversed destinies. One guilty man won freedom, another, blameless, was handed over to crucifixion. Who was this man? What meaning does his liberation hold for us? Today, we will unravel the life, the symbol, and the echo of Barabbas, the freed man, the mirror of humanity, the invitation to look within. Before we begin, if these kinds of stories appeal to you, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching us from. I promise you a rigorous journey, not a moralistic sermon, but a narrative investigation that intertwines history, sociology, and theology. Let's reconstruct Jerusalem, imagine the streets, and listen to the rumors that surrounded that Passover day. Because Barabbas is not just a footnote, he is a gateway to questions that still haunt us. The city of Jerusalem at Passover was a human hive. Crowds arrived from all over, the markets bustled, the religious authorities moved nervously, the Roman soldiery guarded the squares. Under this political tension, riots and phalanxes of men who did not accept the imperial yoke often emerged. Many sought liberation through violent means. Some embraced the idea of a warrior messiah who would expel the Romans. In that climate, a man accused of sedition and murder, Barabbas, was not just a criminal, he was the embodiment of a political and social choice. For some, he was a bandit, for others, a freedom fighter. Passover brought the memory of Israel's liberation and the tangible and dangerous possibility of rebellion into the same context. The Gospels provide us with scant, precise information. A famous prisoner who had committed murder in the insurrection, Mark 15:7. His name, Barabbas, son of the Father, constitutes a brutal paradox compared to Jesus, Son of God. Some ancient manuscripts indicate that his name could have been Jesus Barabbas, which would have transformed the scene into an almost theatrical contrast. Two men named Jesus, one freed, the other condemned. Barabbas is possibly a rebel, a member of the Zealots or of bands seeking to expel the Romans. His real biography is lost in historical rumor, but his symbol remains. The man who relies on force to achieve freedom. Pontius Pilate, a ruler adept at minimizing conflicts, resorted to a practice intended to calm the waters, releasing a prisoner at the Passover feast. It was a political, theatrical, and calculated gesture. By offering two names, one accused of sedition, the other presented by the religious leaders as a king and seducer of the people, Pilate created a charged scene, publicly choosing which path the crowd preferred. The crowd's selection was not a purely juridical act. It was a gesture laden with power, manipulation, and symbolism. And the crowd, driven by the priests and their own expectations, shouted, "Barabbas!" Thus, by public will and political maneuvering, human justice was overturned and the dramatic exchange was consummated. Beyond the judicial verdict, the episode is a symbolic exchange. The innocent accept the guilty person's punishment. The guilty person obtains the freedom they do not deserve. In theological terms, this act is the heart of the Christian message. Jesus becomes a substitute, not out of weakness but out of loving sovereignty, and assumes the punishment that belonged to others. Barabbas is freed without having asked for forgiveness. Jesus surrenders without having committed a crime. The scene reveals a divine logic that subverts human logic, redemption through altruism and grace rather than retribution and revenge. After his release from prison, Barabbas disappears from the gospel texts. This silence has fueled centuries of conjecture. Did he convert and live a transformed life? Did he return to violence? Did he get lost in the city's crowds? We have no answers. But the textual void is not a mere omission. It is a powerful narrative device. The absence forces the reader or listener to complete the story, Barabbas's, and above all their own. The incomplete figure functions as a mirror. To the extent that Barabbas does not have a written epilogue, every human being is called to write their own ending in the face of the freedom they have received. Barabbas condenses traits of the human condition: anger, disillusionment, the search for justice through force, the temptation to reproduce violence to fix the world. And, paradoxically, his freedom underscores the possibility of grace. In Christian reading, Barabbas is an archetype, the unworthy neighbor upon whom mercy is poured out. His story speaks to the way society often opts for immediate, earthly solutions: the sword, conflict, over the patience of forgiveness that transforms. This archetype challenges us. What is our method for seeking justice? Is it Barabbas's rupture, revenge, or Jesus's surrender, reconciliation? Those who cried out for a warrior Messiah saw in Barabbas the figure who embodied their expectations. They wanted authority, the expulsion of the oppressor, the affirmation of national power. Jesus offered another economy, that of service, coherence with suffering, and the subversion of power through love. The crowd chose the one who promised restoration through arms, not through inner transformation. This choice reveals the human tendency to prefer leaders who confirm our desires and prejudices. But divine history opted for the unthinkable, that the greatest liberation, reconciliation with God, would come through surrender, not conquest. Let's imagine Barabbas as he left. Unsteady steps in a city celebrating, the sun on his face, physical freedom that doesn't guarantee inner freedom, his conscience either asleep or awakening. Perhaps he heard rumors of a procession and wanted to see from afar. Perhaps he never knew that the one who carried his guilt was just a few feet away. Perhaps, on his first night of freedom, he drank to forget or fell into the same logic that led him to prison. Or, alternatively, perhaps something changed. An encounter, a word, a vision of the cross that secretly transformed his soul. Every hypothesis underscores one truth: freedom that finds no answer is half freedom. True freedom demands a decision. The release of Barabbas raises not only historical questions, but also theological ones. What does it mean to be justified by another? How can we understand the idea of substitution without falling into simplistic overtones? Christian tradition has interpreted this episode as the embodiment of redemptive love. One who is just by nature takes on the punishment of the unjust to open a new path. But there is also a moral call. The grace received is no excuse to continue in the same life. If Christ bore the guilt, the human response must be a transformed life, responsibility, reparation, and a commitment to true justice. Barabbas reminds us of the gratuitousness of grace and at the same time the ethical demand that follows. The scene of the exchange continues to hold a mirror up to societies. How do we administer justice? Do we prefer expedient solutions that appease conflict, or do we seek educational and restorative transformations? The gesture of freeing a prisoner to appease a crowd has modern resonances. When integrity is sacrificed for public complacency, history shows that something essential is lost. Collective memory remembers and repeats patterns. We often prefer leaders and actions that confirm immediate emotions rather than lengthy processes of restitution. If the story of Barabbas leaves the reader's life incomplete, it is because the question becomes intimate. What will you do with the freedom others granted you? Will you continue as before, justifying yourself and repeating the inner violence? Or will you transform your life in response to the one who took your place? Christian grace is presented as an offer that demands a response, not merely passive gratitude, but active conversion. Free freedom becomes a sacred responsibility. Barabbas was not the hero of a book. He was a sign, the manifestation that grace reaches even the most unexpected. His absence in subsequent stories does not diminish his significance. It intensifies it. By leaving us without an epilogue, Scripture compels us to fill it with our decisions. In its shadow, we understand the light. The cross proclaimed that love can exchange destinies and that mercy is stronger than judgment. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel to continue unraveling the lives and symbols that shaped history. Share in the comments. What do you think Barabbas did after his freedom? How would you respond if you knew someone had taken your place? Barabbas leaves the pages, but his shadow follows us. Perhaps his freedom was a historical accident, perhaps an opportunity for salvation. The truth is that in the tension between guilt and grace, we learn that the last word does not lie with the crowd, but with the love that gives its life for others.